Hi, this is Rob Sheen with the Source Conference, and I'm here with Sandy Carielli, who is the Director of Security Technologies at Entrust DataCard. And she's going to be speaking at Source Boston on May 9th and 10th, and she's actually leading a panel, and the panel is called Hacking Entrepreneurship, Lessons from Security Startup Founders, which is a really cool topic for a panel. Really looking forward to seeing that talk. Welcome, Sandy.
Thanks very much for having me, Rob. Good to be here.
Awesome. So why run an entrepreneurship panel at a security conference? What's that about?
Well, if you look at the security industry, like last year, I was at RSA conference and I ran into a friend of mine as we were about to head into the expo, and I said to him, "Hey, are you displaying at conference?" And he said, "No, we tried to be an exhibitor. There are 800 exhibitors this year, and we were 400th on the waiting list." There are a huge number of companies and organizations in the security space. There are analysts that say they follow, 1,500 different companies in security. It's just such a large space, and people are constantly starting up new ideas, starting up new companies, and it's constantly evolving and churning. A lot of acquisition, a lot of things being taken private these days. So it's a very relevant topic, and I think a lot of people wonder, would they want to start something? So that's sort of where it came about.
Cool. Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously a big fan of entrepreneurs, and it's kind of my thing as well. And I do see it as like a way of kind of refreshing the industry on a regular basis, but it also kind of provides a way for people that want to get out of the grind of being an employee, a way out of that and doing something a little bit more personal that they really want to do. So that's awesome. So tell us about your panelists and why you chose those, the ones that are on the panel.
I had a great set of panelists to choose from, and initially, Jen Andre and I were actually speaking, getting to know each other over coffee, and she was telling me about a lot of her experiences starting up a company, and I just thought it was really fascinating hearing a lot of her stories. And she and I started to brainstorm and say, hey, it would be really cool to take what you've learned and bring a couple of other people in and put a panel together. And through Jen, we reached out to both Justine and Georgia and realized we had this set of 3 people who all had great technical security backgrounds and then went the entrepreneurship route and could talk about their experiences both as technologists and as entrepreneurs. And I thought that would create a really different type of take on a standard entrepreneurship panel.
Cool. And you actually managed to pull together an all-women's panel, which doesn't happen in security very often. So that was great, too.
No, it's a great group of people. And honestly, I hope that people will see them first and foremost as phenomenal technologists and successful entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everybody on that panel is a rock star. So
they really are.
Very much.
I'm excited that they all were so eager to jump in, and I think they're going to have some great stories to tell.
Yep. Yeah, that was definitely, I think I mentioned somebody else. When I saw that panel come in on the CFP, I was just like, oh, that's a yes. It wasn't even a question. I was like, oh, that's a really good panel. So what are the kinds of things you're looking to ask them that you think you can cover in the panel?
There are a lot of different areas that I think we're going to go down. I think some of it's going to be around funding and making decisions around that. Do you go with investors? Do you go bootstrap? And some of the different decisions and approaches that the panelists took to that. Also want to talk a lot about hiring. In particular, as I mentioned, the panelists all came from a technical background, and sort of making that decision about when to bring in sales or bring in a CEO or not, and things like that was a really interesting conversation that I'd like to delve into. And then we also had some really interesting chats in sort of our pre-call about different aspects of competition and what that means in the market. So those are all areas that I'm really eager to get into.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. The funding one's always interesting, right? Because there's so many different paths you can take to getting your company funded, and everybody kind of knows about VC funding, but it'd be interesting to know if any of them took alternate paths to getting funded, either bootstrapping or whatever.
And some of them did.
Right.
Which was really interesting. It was also interesting to hear about some of the challenges when they did take investor funding, about investor expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I think you'll find very interesting as we go through the discussion. Some of the things that the panelists had to educate their investors about, or that they sometimes disagreed with their investors about, often specific to what the security industry is.
Right, right. The other interesting thing you brought up is when to hire certain employees. I, having gone down
Yeah.
that path myself, deciding, should employee number three be a technical person or a business person or a salesperson or an executive, or, kind of figuring out how to balance that off with, what does the company most need right now? That's always interesting as well.
Yeah, exactly that, actually. In talking with Jen, Justine, and Georgia, they all had opinions and a lot of guidance in terms of how they prioritized their hiring
Hmm.
and what they really invested in early on and what they needed. And that was a really interesting discussion that we had.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's definitely probably one of the more challenging things to decide because there's no real rule book for that. It's basically every situation's a little bit unique and different, and you got to
Right.
just kind of play the ball where it lies, so to speak.
Well, and there's also the question of what is it that you're bringing to the table as a founder,
Hmm.
and then what are the gaps that you have that you need to fill, and how do you find the right person to address those?
Exactly, right. Because if you're more of a business person, you probably need more of the technical side. If you're super technical, you probably need more of the business help or the sales help. So it definitely matters a lot who the founder is.
Yeah, so I think there'll be some really interesting discussion around that.
Very cool. So who should come to your talk? I mean, is this just for entrepreneurs, or can anybody get some value out of this, whether they're an entrepreneur type person or not?
I think everyone can get some value out of this. Honestly, Rob, I'm not an entrepreneur, and I think I'm going to get tremendous value out of this. I already have. Anyone who works either starting their own company or within an organization where they're perhaps starting up a new product line or have an innovative idea, there's always that question of how you build a business and how you decide to go forward and what kind of funding models you might need and who are the right people to bring onto that early stage team. So even if you aren't planning to start a business in the next couple of years, you may be starting up something within a company that you already work for. And I think you can learn about how to adjust and how to think about your team and all of that from this discussion.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely. I found some of the entrepreneurship type lessons definitely do apply within larger companies as well, because you can definitely run smaller teams within a large organization in that kind of way with that kind of mindset.
And actually, I think that's how a lot of larger companies manage to evolve and innovate. They're able to
Hmm.
have that corporate entrepreneurship mindset and internally regularly start up those smaller projects and smaller products and build something from that. And so if you can learn from sort of more of a classic entrepreneurship standpoint and apply those back into your organization, I think that's incredibly valuable too.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. You know, basically a lot of big companies almost stop innovating and end up having to buy everybody because that's the only way they
Right.
can get new in ideas into their company. So the ones that seem to succeed at it are the ones that carve off little groups and say, all right, you can run your thing basically like a startup and, figure out some new ideas and get some new innovation. And the nice thing about a bigger company, is that they can self fund and pipe some money
Right.
into the project more easily than, a founder going, please, sir, I may have some more.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly, a little bit more ease with funding, although there are expectations that come with that as well.
Sure.
One of the things that I think is sometimes easier with a classic entrepreneurship scenario versus an in-company corporate entrepreneurship is that there's often this need to adjust and to pivot based
Mhm.
on circumstances in the market or how a product is evolving or something like that. And I think that's sometimes easier to do at a startup where you're very much used to that mindset. And learning to do it from a corporate entrepreneurship standpoint can be a little more challenging, but it's an incredibly valuable skill, knowing how to be aware and realize that a change needs to be made quickly enough, and then making that change.
Well, I can't wait to see this talk, and it's going to be a great to continue this conversation at Source. And so on May 9th and 10th, Sandy and her team of rockstar entrepreneurs will all be at Source. And that's the nice thing about Source is it's a intimate enough event where you can actually talk to all the speakers and carry on these conversations. So I definitely encourage you, anybody that wants to continue this conversation, be part of this conversation, to stop by Source on May 9th and 10th in Boston at the Courtyard Marriott downtown. And hopefully we'll see a lot of you there.
It's going to be great. Thank you, Rob.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy.